They sang this while cutting a man's throat in a cellar or a thicket. It is a serious symptom that in the 18th century the old melancholy of three desponding classes is dissipated, and they begin to laugh. They mock the great Meg and the great Dab, Governor, and Louis XV. Being given they call the King of France the Marquis de Pantin. The wretches are nearly gay, and a sort of dancing light issues from them, as if their conscience no longer weighed them down. These lamentable tribes of darkness no longer possess the despairing audacity of deeds, but the careless audacity of the mind. This is a sign that they are losing the feeling of their criminality and finding some support, of which they are themselves ignorant, among the thinkers and dreamers. It is a sign that robbery and plunder are beginning to be filtered even into doctrines and sophisms, so as to lose a little of their ugliness and give a good deal of it to the sophisms and the doctrine. Lastly, it is a sign of a prodigious and speedy eruption unless some diversion arise. Let us halt here for a moment. Whom do we accuse? Is it the 18th century? Is it all philosophy? Certainly not. The work of the 18th century is healthy and good, and the encyclopedists with Diderot at their head, the physicists under Turgot, the philosophers led by Voltaire, and the utopists commanded by Rousseau are four sacred legions. The immense advance of humanity toward the light is due to them, and they are the four advance guards of the human races, going toward the four cardinal points of progress: Diderot toward the beautiful, Turgot toward the useful, Voltaire toward truth, and Rousseau toward justice. But by the side of and below the philosophers were the sophists, a venomous vegetation mingled with a healthy growth, a hemlock in the virgin forest. While the hangman was burning on the grand staircase of the Palace of Justice the grand liberating books of the age, writers now forgotten were publishing, with the royal privilege, strangely disorganizing books, which were eagerly read by the scoundrels. Some of these publications, patronized, strange to say, by a prince, will be found in the Bibliothèque Secrète. These facts, profound but unknown, were unnoticed on the surface, but at times the very obscurity of a fact constitutes its danger, and it is obscure because it is subterranean. Of all the writers, the one who perhaps dug the most unhealthy gallery at that day in the masses was Restif de la Bretonne. This work, peculiar to all Europe, produced greater ravages in Germany than anywhere else. In Germany, during a certain period, which was summed up by Schiller in his famous drama of the robbers, robbery and plunder were raised into a protest against property and labor. They appropriated certain elementary ideas, specious and false, apparently just, and in reality absurd, wrapped themselves up in these ideas, and to some extent disappeared in them, assumed an abstract name, and passed into a theoretical state, and in this way circulated among the laborious, suffering, and honest masses, without even the cognizance of the imprudent chemists who prepared the mixture, and the masses that accepted it. Whenever a fact of this nature is produced, it is serious. Suffering engenders passion, and while the prosperous blind themselves or go to deep, the hatred of the unfortunate classes kindles its torch at some sullen or ill-constituted mind which is dreaming in a corner and sets to work examining society. The examination of hatred is a terrible thing. Hence come, if the misfortune of the age desires it, those frightful commotions, formerly called jacqueries, by the side of which purely political commotions are child's play, and which are no longer the struggle of the oppressed with the oppressor, but the revolt of want against comfort. Everything is overthrown at such a time. Jacqueries are the earthquakes of nations. The French Revolution, that immense act of probity, cut short this peril, which was perhaps imminent in Europe toward the close of the 18th century. The French Revolution, which was nothing but the Idyll armed with a sword, rose, and by the same sudden movement closed the door of evil and opened the door of good. It disengaged the question, promulgated the truth, expelled the miasma, ventilated the age, and crowned the people. We may say that it created man a second time by giving him a second soul, justice. The 19th century inherits and profits by its work, and at the present day, the social catastrophe, which we just now indicated, is simply impossible. Blind is he who denounces it, a fool who fears it, for the revolution is the vaccine of Jacquerie. Thanks to the revolution, the social conditions are altered, and the feudal and monarchical diseases are no longer in our blood. There is no middle age left in our constitution, and we are no longer at the time when formidable internal commotions broke out. when the obscure course of a dull sound could be heard beneath the feet, when the earth thrown out from the mole holes appeared on the surface of civilization, when the soil cracked, when the roof of caverns opened and monstrous heads suddenly emerged from the ground. The revolutionary sense is a moral sense, and the feeling of right being develops the feeling of duty. The law of all is liberty, which ends where the liberty of another begins, according to Robespierre's admirable definition. Since 1789, the whole people has been dilated in the sublimated individual. There is no poor man who, having his right, has not his radius. The man, dying of hunger, feels within himself the honesty of France. The dignity of the citizen is an internal armor. The man who is free is scrupulous, and the voter reigns. Hence comes incorruptibility, hence comes the abortiveness of unhealthy covetousness, and hence eyes heroically lowered before temptation. The revolutionary healthiness is so great that on a day of deliverance, a 14th of July or a 10th of August, there is no populace, and the first cry of the enlightened and progressing crowds is, "Death to the robbers." Progress is an honest man, and the ideal and the absolute do not steal pocket handkerchiefs. By whom were the carriages containing the wealth of the Tuileries escorted in 1848? By the rag-pickers of the Faubourg Saint-Antoine. The rag mounted guard over the treasure. Virtue rendered these ragged creatures resplendent. In these carts, in barely closed chests, some, indeed, still opened, there was, amid 100 dazzling cases, that old crown of France, all made of diamonds, surmounted by the royal carbuncle and the regent diamonds, worth 30 millions of francs. Barefooted they guarded this crown. Hence jackery is no longer possible, and I feel sorry for the clever men. It is an old fear which has made its last effort and could no longer be employed in politics. The great spring of the red spectre is now broken. Everybody understands this now. The scarecrow no longer horrifies. The birds treat the mannequin familiarly and deposit their guano upon it, and the bourgeois laugh at it. Chapter 4. Two duties, to watch and to hope. This being the case, is every social danger dissipated? Certainly not. There is no jackery, and society may be reassured on that side. The blood will not again rush to its head, but it must pay attention to the way in which it breathes. Apoplexy is no longer to be apprehended, but there is consumption, and social consumption is called wretchedness. People die as well when undermined as when struck by lightning. We shall never grow weary of repeating that to think first of all of the disinherited and sorrowful classes, to relieve, ventilate, enlighten, and love them, to magnificently enlarge their horizon, to lavish upon them education in every shape, to offer them the example of labor and never that of indolence, to lessen the weight of the individual burden by increasing the notion of the universal object, to limit poverty without limiting wealth, to create vast fields of public and popular activity, to have, like Briareus, 100 hands to stretch out on all sides to the crushed and the weak, to employ the collective power in opening workshops for every arm, schools for every aptitude, and laboratories for every intellect, to increase wages, diminish the toil, and balance the debit and credit, that is to say, proportion the enjoyment to the effort, and the satisfaction to the wants, in a word, to evolve from the social machine, on behalf of those who suffer and those who are ignorant, more light and more comfort. And sympathetic souls must not forget it, the first of brotherly obligations, and let egotistic hearts learn the fact, the first of political necessities. And all this, we are bound to add, is only a beginning, and the true question is this: labor cannot be law without being a right. But this is not the place to dwell on such a subject. If nature is called providence, society ought to call itself foresight. Intellectual and moral growth is no less indispensable than natural amelioration. Knowledge is a viaticum, thinking is a primary necessity, and truth is nourishment, like wheat. A reason fasting for knowledge and wisdom grows thin, and we must pity minds that do not eat quite as much as stomachs. If there be anything more poignant than a body pining away for want of bread, it is a mind that dies of hunger for enlightenment. The whole of our progress tends toward the solution, and some day people will be stupefied as the human race ascends. The deepest strata will naturally emerge from the zone of distress, and the effacement of wretchedness will be effected by a simple elevation of the level. we would do wrong to doubt this blessed solution. The past, we grant, is very powerful at the present hour and is beginning again. This rejuvenescence of a corpse is surprising. It seems victorious. This dead man is a conqueror. Behold him advancing and arriving. He arrives with his legion, superstitions, with his sword, despotism, with his barrier, ignorance, and during some time past he has gained 10 battles. He advances, he threatens, he laughs, he is at our gates. But we have no reason to despair. Let us sell the field on which Hannibal is encamped. What can we, who believe, fear? A recoil of ideas is no more possible than it is for a river to flow up a hill. But those who desire no future ought to reflect. By saying no to progress, they do not condemn the future, but themselves, and they give themselves a deadly disease by inoculating themselves with the past. There is only one way of refusing tomorrow, and that is by dying. We wish for no death, that of the body as late as possible, and that of the soul never. Yes, the Sphinx will speak, and the problem will be solved. The people sketched by the 18th century will be finished by the 19th. He is an idiot who doubts it. The future, the speedy bursting into flower of universal welfare, is a divinely fatal phenomenon. Immense and combined impulsions pushing together govern human facts and lead them all within a given time to the logical state, that is to say, to equilibrium, or in other words, to equity. A force composed of earth and heaven results from humanity and governs it. This force is a performer of miracles, and marvelous denouements are as easy to it as extraordinary incidents. Aided by science, which comes from man, and the event, which comes from another source, it is but little frightened by those contradictions in the posture of problems which seem to the vulgar herd impossibilities. It is no less skillful in producing a solution from the approximation of ideas than in producing instruction from the approximation of facts, and we may expect anything and everything from the mysterious power of progress, which, on fine days, confronts the East and the West in a sepulchre, and makes the imams hold conference with Bonaparte in the interior of the Great Pyramid. In the meanwhile, there is no halt, no hesitation, no check in the grand forward march of minds. Social philosophy is essentially the source of peace. It has for its object, and must have as result, the dissolution of passions by the study of antagonisms. It examines, scrutinizes, and analyzes, and then it recomposes, and it proceeds by the reducing process, by removing hatred from everything. It has more than once occurred that a society has been sunk by the wind which is let loose on men. History is full of the shipwrecks of peoples and empires. One day, that stranger, the hurricane, passes and carries away manners, laws, and religions. The civilizations of India, Chaldea, Persia, Assyria, and Egypt have disappeared in turn. Why? We are ignorant. What are the causes of these disasters? We do not know. Could those societies have been saved? Was it any fault of their own? Did they obstinately adhere to some fatal vice which destroyed them? What amount of suicide is there in these terrible deaths of a nation and a race? These are unanswerable questions, for darkness covers the condemned civilizations. They have been under water since they sank, and we have no more to say. And it is with a species of terror that we see in the background of that sea which is called the past, and behind those gloomy waves, centuries, those immense vessels, Babylon, Nineveh, Tarsus, Thebes, and Rome, sunk by the terrific blast which blows from all the mouths of the darkness. But there was darkness then, and we have light. And if we are ignorant of the diseases of ancient civilizations, we know the infirmities of our own, and we contemplate its beauties and lay bare its deformities. Wherever it is wounded, we probe it, and at once the suffering is decided, and the study of the cause leads to the discovery of the remedy. Our civilization, the work of 20 centuries, is at once the monster and the prodigy, and is worth saving. It will be saved. To aid it is much, and to enlighten it is also something. All the labors of modern social philosophy ought to converge to this object, and the thinker of the present day has a grand duty to apply the stethoscope to civilization. We repeat it, this auscultation is encouraging, and we intend to finish these few pages, which are an austere interlude in a mournful drama, by laying a stress on this encouragement. Beneath the social mortality, the human imperishableness is felt, and the globe does not die because here and there are wounds in the shape of craters and ringworms in the shape of solfatari, and a volcano which breaks out and scatters its fires around. The diseases of the people do not kill the man. And yet some of those who follow the social clinics shake their heads at times, and the strongest, the most tender, and the most logical have their hours of dependency. Will the future arrive? It seems as if we may almost ask this question on seeing so much terrible shadow. There is a somber, face-to-face meeting of the egotists and the wretched. In the egotist we trace prejudices, the cloudiness of a caste education, appetite growing with intoxication, and prosperity that stuns, a fear of suffering which in some goes so far as an aversion from the sufferers, an implacable satisfaction, and the feeling of self so swollen that it closes the soul. In the wretched we find covetousness, envy, the hatred of seeing others successful, the great bounds of the human beast toward gorging, hearts full of mist, sorrow, want, fatality, and foul and common ignorance. Must we still raise our eyes to heaven? Is the luminous point which we notice there one of those which die out? The ideal is frightful to look on thus lost in the depths, small, isolated, imperceptible, and brilliant, but surrounded by all those great black menaces monstrously collected around it. For all that, though, it is in no more danger than a star in the yawning throat of the clouds. Book VIII. Enchantments and Desolations. Chapter 1. Bright Light. The reader has of course understood that Eponine, on recognizing through the railings the inhabitant of the house in the Rue Plumet, to which Magnon sent her, began by keeping the bandits aloof from the house, then led Marius to it, and that, after several days of ecstasy before the railings, Marius, impelled by that force which attracts iron to the lodestone, and the lover toward the stones, of the house in which she whom he loves resides, had eventually entered Cosette's garden, as Romeo did Juliet's. This had even been an easier task for him than for Romeo was obliged to scale a wall, while Marius had merely to move one of the bars of the decrepit railing loose in its rusty setting, after the fashion of the teeth of old people. As Marius was thin, he easily passed. As there never was anybody in the street, and as Marius never entered the garden save at night, he ran no risk of being seen. From that blessed and holy hour when a kiss affianced these two souls, Marius went to the garden every night. If at this moment of her life Cosette had fallen in love with an unscrupulous libertine, she would have been lost, for there are generous natures that surrender themselves, and Cosette was one of them. One of the magnanimities of a woman is to yield, and love, at that elevation where it is absolute, is complicated by a certain celestial blindness of modesty. But what dangers you incur, ye noble souls! You often give the heart and we take the body. Your heart is left you, and you look at it in the darkness with a shudder. Love has no middle term. It either saves or destroys, and this dilemma is the whole of human destiny. No fatality offers this dilemma of ruin or salvation more inexorably than does love, for love is life, if it be not death. It is a cradle, but also a coffin. The same feeling says yes and no in the human heart, and of all the things which God has made, the human heart is the one which evolves the most light, and, alas, the most darkness. God willed it that the love which Cosette encountered was one of those loves which save. So long as the month of May of that year, 1832, lasted, there were every night in this poor untrimmed garden, and under this thicket, which daily became more fragrant and more thick, two beings composed of all the chastities and all the innocences, overflowing with all the felicities of heaven, nearer to the archangels than to man, pure, honest, intoxicated, and radiant, and who shone for each other in the darkness. It seemed to Cosette as if Marius had a crown, and to Marius as if Cosette had a glory. They touched each other, they looked at each other, they took each other by the hand, they drew close to each other, but there was a distance which they never crossed. Not that they respected it, but they were ignorant of it. Marius felt a barrier in Cosette's purity, and Cosette felt a support in the loyalty of Marius. The first kiss had also been the last. Since then Marius had never gone beyond touching Cosette's hand or neck handkerchief, or a curl with his lips. Cosette was to him a perfume, and not a woman, and he inhaled her. She refused nothing, and he asked for nothing. Cosette was happy, and Marius satisfied. They lived in that ravishing state, which might be called the dazzling of a soul by a soul. It was the ineffable first embrace of two virginities in the ideal, two swans meeting on the Jungfrau. At this hour of love, the hour when voluptuousness is absolutely silenced by the omnipotence of ecstasy, Marius, the pure and seraphic Marius, would have sooner been able to go home with a street walker then raise Cosette's gown as high as her ankle. Once in the moonlight, Cosette stooped to pick up something on the ground, and her dress opened and displayed her neck. Marius turned his eyes away. What passed between these two lovers? Nothing. They adored each other. At night, when they were there, this garden seemed a living and sacred spot. All the flowers opened around them and sent them their incense, and they opened their souls and spread them over the flowers. The wanton and vigorous vegetation quivered, full of sap and intoxication, around these two innocents, and they uttered words of love at which the trees shivered. What were these words? Breathings, nothing more, but they were sufficient to trouble and affect all this nature. It is a magic power which it would be difficult to understand, were we to read in a book. This conversation made to be carried away and dissipated like smoke beneath the leaves by the wind. Take away from these whispers of two lovers the melody which issues from the soul and accompanies them like a lyre, and what is left is only a shadow, and you say, what? Is it only that? Well, yes, child's play, repetitions, laughs at nothing, absurdities, foolishness, all that is the most sublime and profound in the world, the only things which are worth the trouble of being said and being listened to. The man who has never heard, the man who has never uttered these absurdities and poor things is an imbecile and a wicked man, said Cosette to Marius. Do you know that my name is Euphrasie? Euphrasie? No, it is Cosette. Oh, Cosette is an ugly name which was given me when I was little, but my real name is Euphrasie. Don't you like that name? Yes, but Cosette is not ugly. Do you like it better than Euphrasie? Well, yes. In that case, I like it better too. That is true, Cosette is pretty, call me Cosette. Another time she looked at him intently and exclaimed, You are handsome, sir, you are good-looking, you have wit, you are not at all stupid, you are much more learned than I, but I challenge you with, I love you. And Marius fancied that he heard a strophe sung by a star, or else she gave him a little tap when he coughed and said, Do not cough, sir, I do not allow anybody to cough in my house without permission. It is very wrong to cough and frighten me. I wish you to be in good health, because if you were not, I should be very unhappy, and what would you have me do? And this was simply divine. Once Marius said to Cosette, Just fancy, I supposed for a while that your name was Ursule. This made them laugh the whole evening. In the middle of another conversation, he happened to exclaim, Oh, one day at the Luxembourg, I felt disposed to finish breaking an invalid. But he stopped short and did not complete the sentence, for he would have been obliged to allude to Cosette's garter, and that was impossible. There was a strange feeling connected with the flesh, before which this immense, innocent love recoiled with a sort of holy terror. Marius imagined life with Cosette like this, without anything else, to come every evening to the Rue Plumet, remove the old complacent bar of the President's railings, sit down elbow to elbow on this bench, look through the trees at the scintillation of the commencing night, bring the fold in trouser knee into cohabitation with Cosette's ample skirts, to caress her thumbnail, and to inhale the same flower in turn, forever and indefinitely. During this tune, the clouds passed over their heads, and each time the wind blows, it carries off more of a man's thoughts than of clouds from the sky. We cannot affirm that this chaste, almost stern love was absolutely without gallantry. Paying compliments to her whom we love is the first way of giving caresses and an attempted semi-boldness. A compliment is something like a kiss through a veil, and pleasure puts its sweet point upon it while concealing itself. In the presence of the delight the heart recoils to love more. The cajoleries of Marius, all saturated with chimera, were, so to speak, of an azure blue. The birds, when they fly in the direction of the angels, must hear words of the same nature, still, life, humanity, and the whole amount of positivism of which Marius was capable were mingled with it. It was what is said in the grotto, as a prelude to what will be said in the alcove, a lyrical effusion, the strophe and the sonnet commingled, the gentle hyperboles of cooing, all the refinements of adoration arranged in a posy, and exhaling a subtle and celestial perfume, an ineffable prattling of heart to heart. Oh, Marius muttered, how lovely you are, I dare not look at you, and that is the reason why I contemplate you. You are a grace, and I know not what is the matter with me. The hem of your dress, where the end of your slipper passes through, upsets me. And then what an enchanting light when your thoughts become visible, for your reason astonishes me, and you appear to me for instants to be a dream. Speak, I am listening to you and admiring you. Oh, Cosette, how strange and charming it is. I am really mad. You are adorable, and I study your feet in the microscope and your soul with the telescope. And Cosette made answer, and I love you a little more through all the time which has passed since this morning. Questions and answers went on as they could in this dialogue, which always agreed in the subject of love, like the elderpith balls on the nail. Cosette's entire person was simplicity, ingenuousness, whiteness, candor, and radiance, and it might have been said of her that she was transparent. She produced on everyone who saw her a sensation of April and daybreak, and she had dew in her eyes. Cosette was a condensation of the light of dawn in a woman's form. It was quite simple that Marius, as he adored, should admire. But the truth is that this little boarding school miss, just freshly turned out of a convent, talked with exquisite penetration and made at times all sorts of true and delicate remarks. Her chattering was conversation, and she was never mistaken about anything and conversed correctly. Woman feels and speaks with the infallibility which is the tender instinct of the heart. No one knows like a woman how to say things which are at once gentle and deep. Gentleness and depth, in those things the whole of woman is contained, and it is heaven. And in this perfect felicity tears welled in their eyes at every moment. A ladybird crushed, a feather that fell from a nest, a branch of hawthorn broken, moved their pity, and then ecstasy, gently drowned by melancholy, seemed to ask for nothing better than to weep. The most sovereign symptom of love is a tenderness which becomes at times almost insupportable. And by the side of all this, for contradictions are the lightning sport of love, they were fond of laughing with a ravishing liberty, and so familiarly that, at times, they almost seemed like two lads. Still, even without these two hearts intoxicated with chastity being conscious of it, unforgettable nature is ever there with its brutal and sublime object. And whatever the innocence of souls may be, they feel in the most chaste tête-à-tête the mysterious and adorable distinction which separates a couple of lovers from a pair of friends. They idolized each other. The permanent and the immutable exist. A couple love, they laugh, they make little pouts with their lips, they intertwine their fingers, and that does not prevent eternity. Two lovers conceal themselves in a garden in the twilight, in the invisible, with the birds and the roses. They fascinate each other in the darkness with their souls which they place in their eyes. They mutter, they whisper, and during this period, immense constellations of planets fill infinity. Chapter 2. The Giddiness of Perfect Bliss. Cosette and Marius lived vaguely in the intoxication of their madness, and they did not notice the cholera which was decimating Paris in that very month. They had made as many confessions to each other as they could, but they had not extended very far beyond their names. Marius had told Cosette that he was an orphan, Pontmercy by name, a lawyer by profession, and gaining a livelihood by writing things for publishers. His father was a colonel, a hero, and he, Marius, had quarreled with his grandfather, who was very rich. He also incidentally remarked that he was a baron, but this did not produce much effect on Cosette. Marius a baron? She did not understand it, and did not know what the word meant, and Marius was Marius to her. For her part, she confided to him that she had been educated at the convent of the little Picpus, that her mother was dead like his, that her father's name was Fauchelevent, that he was very good and gave a great deal to the poor, but was himself poor and deprived himself of everything, while depriving her of nothing. Strange to say, in the species of symphony which Marius had lived in since he found Cosette again, the past, even the most recent, had become so confused and distant to him that what Cosette told him completely satisfied him. He did not even dream of talking to her about the nocturnal adventure in the garret, the Thénardiers, the burning, the strange attitude and singular flight of her father. Marius momentarily forgot all this. He did not know at night what he had done in the morning, where he had breakfasted, or who had spoken to him. He had a song in his ears which rendered him deaf to every other thought, and he only existed during the hours when he saw Cosette. As he was in heaven at that time, it was perfectly simple that he should forget the earth. Both of them bore languidly the undefinable weight of immaterial joys. That is the way in which those somnambulists called lovers live. Alas, who is there that has not experienced these things? Why does an hour arrive when we emerge from this azure, and why does life go on afterwards? Love almost takes the place of thought. Love is, indeed, an ardent forgetfulness. It is absurd to ask passion for logic, for there is no more an absolute logical concatenation in the human heart than there is a perfect geometric figure in the celestial mechanism. For Cosette and Marius, nothing more existed than Marius and Cosette. The whole universe around them had fallen into a gulf, and they lived in a golden moment, with nothing before them, nothing behind them. Marius scarce remembered that Cosette had a father. It was blotted from his brain by his bedazzlement. Of what did these lovers talk? As we have seen, of flowers, swallows, the setting sun, the rising moon, and all the important things. They had told themselves everything except everything, for the everything of lovers is nothing. Of what use would it be to talk of her father, the realities, that den, those bandits, that adventure? And was it quite certain that the nightmare had existed? They were two, they adored each other, and there was only that, there was nothing else. It is probable that this unconsciousness of death behind us is inherent to the arrival in paradise. Have we seen demons? Are there any? Have we trembled? Have we suffered? We no longer know, and there is a roseate cloud over it all. Hence these two beings lived in this way, very high up, and with all the unverisimilitude which there is in nature, neither at the nadir nor at the zenith, but between man and the seraphs, above the mud and below the ether, in the clouds. They were not so much flesh and bone, as soul and ecstasy from head to foot, already too sublimated to walk on earth, and still too loaded with humanity to disappear in ether, and held in suspense like atoms which are waiting to be precipitated, apparently beyond the pale of destiny, and ignorant of that rut, yesterday, today, and tomorrow, amazed, transported, and floating at moments with a lightness sufficient for a flight in the infinitude, and almost ready for the eternal departure. They slept awake in this sweet lulling, O splendid lethargy of the real overpowered by the ideal. At times Cosette was so beautiful that Marius closed his eyes before her. The best way of gazing at the soul is with closed eyes. Marius and Cosette did not ask themselves to what this would lead them, and looked at each other as if they had already arrived. It is a strange claim on the part of men to wish that love should lead them somewhere. Chapter 3. The beginning of the shadow. Jean Valjean suspected nothing, for Cosette, not quite such a dreamer as Marius, was gay, and that sufficed to render Jean Valjean happy. Cosette's thoughts, her tender preoccupations, and the image of Marius which filled her soul, removed none of the incomparable purity of her splendid, chaste, and smiling forehead. She was at the age when the virgin wears her love as the angel wears its lily. Jean Valjean was, therefore, happy, and besides, when two lovers understand each other, things always go well, and any third party who might trouble their love is kept in a perfect state of blindness by a small number of precautions, which are always the same with all lovers. Hence Cosette never made any objections. If he wished to take a walk, very good, my little papa, and if he stayed at home, very good, and if he wished to spend the evening with Cosette, she was enchanted. As he always retired at 10 o'clock at night, on those occasions Marius did not reach the garden till after that hour, when he heard from the street Cosette opening the door. We need hardly say that Marius was never visible by day, and Jean Valjean did not even remember that Marius existed. One morning, however, he happened to say to Cosette, "Why, the back of your dress is all white." On the previous evening, Marius in a transport had pressed Cosette against the wall. Old Toussaint, who went to bed at an early hour, only thought of sleeping so soon as her work was finished, and was ignorant of everything, like Jean Valjean. Marius never set foot in the house when he was with Cosette. They concealed themselves in a niche near the steps, so as not to be seen or heard from the street, and sat there, often contenting themselves with the sole conversation of pressing hands 20 times a minute, and gazing at the branches of the trees. At such moments, had a thunderbolt fallen within 30 feet of them, they would not have noticed it, so profoundly was the reverie of the one absorbed and plunged in the reverie of the other. It was a limpid purity, and the houses were all white, and nearly all alike. This species of love is a collection of lily leaves and dove's feathers. The whole garden was between them and the street, and each time that Marius came in and out, he carefully restored the bar of the railings so that no disarrangement was visible. He went away generally at midnight and went back to Courfeyrac's lodgings. Courfeyrac said to Bahorel, "Can you believe it? Marius returns home at present at 1 in the morning." Bahorel answered, "What would you have? There is always a bombshell inside a seminarist." At times Courfeyrac crossed his arms, assumed a stern air, and said to Marius, "Young man, you are becoming irregular in your habits." Courfeyrac, who was a practical man, was not pleased with this reflection of an invisible paradise cast on Marius. He was but little accustomed to unpublished passions, hence he grew impatient, and at times summoned Marius to return to reality. One morning he cast this admonition to him: "My dear fellow, you produce on me the effect at present of being a denizen of the moon, in the kingdom of dreams, the province of illusion, whose chief city is soap bubble. Come, don't play the prude. What is her name?" But nothing could make Marius speak, and his nails could have been dragged from him more easily than one of the 3 sacred syllables of which the ineffable name Cosette was composed. True love is luminous as the dawn and silent as the tomb. Still, Courfeyrac found this change in Marius, that he had a beaming taciturnity. During the sweet month of May, Marius and Cosette knew this immense happiness, to quarrel and become reconciled, to talk for a long time, and with the most minute details, about people who did not interest them the least in the world. A further proof that in that ravishing opera which is called love, the libretto is nothing. For Marius it was heaven to listen to Cosette talking of dress, for Cosette to listen to Marius talking politics, to listen, knee against knee, to the vehicles passing along the Rue de Babylone, to look at the same planet in space, or the same worm glistening in the grass, to be silent together, a greater pleasure still than talking, etc. Still various complications were approaching. One evening Marius was going to the rendezvous along the Boulevard des Invalides. He was walking as usual with his head down, and as he was turning the corner of the Rue Plumet, he heard someone say close to him, "Good evening, Monsieur Marius." He raised his head and recognized Eponine. This produced a singular effect. He had not once thought of this girl since the day when she led him to the Rue Plumet. He had not seen her again, and she had entirely left his mind. He had only motives to be grateful to her. He owed her his present happiness, and yet it annoyed him to meet her. It is an error to believe that passion, when it is happy and pure, leads a man to a state of perfection. It leads him simply, as we have shown, to a state of forgetfulness. In this situation, man forgets to be wicked, but he also forgets to be good, and gratitude, duty, and essential and material recollections fade away. At any other time Marius would have been very different to Eponine, but absorbed by Cosette, he had not very clearly comprehended that this Eponine was Eponine Thénardier, and that she bore a name written in his father's will, that name to which he would have so ardently devoted himself a few months previously. We show Marius as he was, and his father himself slightly disappeared in his mind beneath the splendor of his love. Hence he replied with some embarrassment, "Ah, is it you, Eponine? Why do you treat me so coldly? Have I done you any injury?" "No," he answered. Certainly he had nothing against her, far from it. Still he felt that he could not but say you to Eponine, now that he said thou to Cosette. As he remained silent, she exclaimed, "Tell me." Then she stopped, and it seemed as if words failed this creature, who was formerly so impudent and bold. She tried to smile, and could not, so continued, "Well." Then she was silent again, and looked down on the ground. "Good night, Monsieur Marius," she suddenly said, and went away. Chapter 4. Cab runs in English and barks in slang. The next day, it was June 3, 1832, a date to which we draw attention owing to the grave events which were at that moment hanging over the horizon of Paris in the state of lightning-charged clouds. Marius at nightfall was following the same road as on the previous evening, with the same ravishing thoughts in his heart, when he saw between the boulevard trees Eponine coming toward him. 2 days running, that was too much, So he sharply turned back, changed his course, and went to the Rue Plumet by the Rue Monsieur. This caused Eponine to follow him as far as the Rue Plumet, a thing she had never done before. Hitherto, she had contented herself with watching him as he passed along the boulevard, without attempting to meet him. Last evening was the first time that she ventured to address him. Eponine followed him then, without his suspecting it. She saw him move the railing bar aside and step into the garden. "Hello," she said. "He enters the house." She went up to the railing, felt the bars in turn, and easily distinguished the one which Marius had removed. And she muttered in a low voice, and with a lugubrious accent, "None of that, Lisette." She sat down on the stonework of the railing, close to the bar, as if she were guarding it. It was exactly at the spot where the railings joined the next wall, and there was there a dark corner, in which Eponine entirely disappeared. She remained thus for more than an hour without stirring or breathing, absorbed in thought. About 10 o'clock at night, one of the 2 or 3 passers along the Rue Plumet, an old belated citizen, who was hurrying along the deserted and ill-famed street, while passing the railing, heard a dull, menacing voice saying, "I am not surprised now that he comes every evening." The passerby looked around him, saw nobody, did not dare to peer into this dark corner, and felt horribly alarmed. He redoubled his speed, and was quite right in doing so, for in a few minutes 6 men, who were walking separately and at some distance from each other, under the walls, and who might have been taken for a drunken patrol, entered the Rue Plumet. The first who reached the railings stopped and waited for the rest, and a second after, all 6 were together, and began talking in whispered slang. "It's here," said one of them. "Is there a cab in the garden?" another asked. "I don't know. In any case, I have brought a bullet which we will make it eat." "Have you got some mastic to break a pane?" "Yes." "The railings are old," remarked the 5th man, who seemed to have the voice of a ventriloquist. "All the better," said the second speaker. "It will make no noise when sawn, and won't be so hard to cut through." The 6th, who had not yet opened his mouth, began examining the railings as Eponine had done an hour ago, and thus reached the bar which Marius had unfastened. Just as he was about to seize this bar, a hand suddenly emerging from the darkness clutched his arm. He felt himself roughly thrust back, and a hoarse voice whispered to him, "There's a cab." At the same time, he saw a pale girl standing in front of him. The man had that emotion which is always produced by things unexpected. His hair stood hideously on end. Nothing is more formidable to look at than startled wild beasts. Their affrighted look is hideous. He fell back and stammered, "Who is this she-devil?" "Your daughter." It was, in truth, Eponine speaking to Thénardier. Upon her apparition, the other 5 men, that is to say, Claquessus, Guillemer, Babet, Montparnasse, and Brujon, approached noiselessly, without hurry or saying a word, but with the sinister slowness peculiar to these men of the night. Some hideous tools could be distinguished in their hands, and Guillemer held a pair of those short pincers which burglars call fauchons, small scythes. "Well, what are you doing here? What do you want? Are you mad?" Thénardier exclaimed, as far as is possible to exclaim in a whisper. "Have you come to prevent us from working?" Eponine burst into a laugh and leaped on his neck. "I am here, my little papa, because I am here. Are not people allowed to sit down on the stones at present? It is you who oughtn't to be here, and what have you come to do, since it is a biscuit? I told Magnon so, and there is nothing to be done here. But embrace me, my good little papa, it is such a time since I saw you. You are out, then." Thénardier tried to free himself from Eponine's arms, and growled, There, you have embraced me. Yes, I am out and not in, now be off." But Eponine did not loose her hold, and redoubled her caresses. "My dear papa, however did you manage? You must have been very clever to get out of that scrape, so tell me all about it. And where is mamma? Give me some news of her." Thénardier answered, "She's all right. I don't know. Leave me and be off, I tell you." "I do not exactly want to go off," Eponine said with the pout of a spoiled child. "You send me away, though I haven't seen you now for 4 months, and I have scarce had time to embrace you." And she caught her father again, round the neck. "Oh, come, this is a bore," said Babet. Make haste, said Guillaume, the police may pass. The ventriloquial voice hummed. Nous ensembles, par le jour de Hélène.